quieting down just as we're about to start, so it's brilliant. Well, first of all, thank you all for coming this evening. I'm very excited to be chairing the Yehuda Amichai Festival, which has been traveling around different locations in the UK for the last 4 days, and is capping things off with the last event here at Oxford. I want to start by thanking Yvonne Green for proposing that we host the Yehuda Amichai Festival here at the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. And I want to thank Judith Schlanger, our new president, the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. She's right there. For supporting this event right away. The moment I mentioned to her, she said, let's do it. And I really appreciate her support for modern Hebrew and Jewish literature initiatives of this kind. And I also want to thank Sharon DeWinter for being, I think she's outside at the moment. She's dealing with books and behind the scenes organizing, but she's been really wonderful to work with. And I'm also very honored to host here Hana Amichai, Yehuda Amichai's widow, who has been such an amazing custodian of his work over the years. And we're also very pleased to have with us Reid, poet, the great poet Christopher Reid, and Erez Bitton from Israel, another wonderful Israeli poet. And I'll say more about them as I introduce their parts of this event. So for the next hour or so, we're going to hear selections from Yehuda Amichai's oeuvre in Hebrew and English translation. And we're also going to hear original works by poets like Erez, Christopher, and Yvonne, who are also going to read their own poems and discuss a bit the relation between Amichai's work and their own work, and the ways that Amichai's poetry continues to be in conversation with contemporary poetry in many languages. So we're going to start with Hana Amichai, who's going to read a poem of her selection, and Yvonne's son Bertie Green will read the English translation, and they'll be sort of going back and forth a little bit. So, and I just want to say a few words about Hana, because as I said, Hana has been such a careful guardian, you could say, of Amichai's work for decades. And Amichai scholars and translators are truly indebted to her generosity and for allowing us to sort of introduce new perspectives, new ways of reading and translating Amichai's work across many languages. The time I spent at the Beinecke Library in the Yehuda Amichai archives, I was reading letters that Amichai had saved, including a number of letters that the poet Ted Hughes had written. And one of the things that really stood out for me is how warmly he wrote about the relationship between Hana and Yehuda, how much he and their friends admired their really collaborative marriage. And that unit remains intact to this day and continues to motivate and inspire us in our work on Amichai. So with those words, I welcome Hana Amichai.
Shalom and good evening. I want to welcome the audience, the dear audience who came over tonight. I want to welcome especially Glenda Abramson, my dear friend, who was the head of the department for a long time here. And I want to thank Adriana for chairing Oxford Yehuda Amichai Poetry Festival. And I want to thank everybody who takes part in the festival, Erez Bitton and Rachel, who helps very much, Christopher Reid. And I'll start by reading the poem, המקום שבו אנו צודקים, the place where we are right. I think Bertie will read the translation. מן המקום שבו אנו צודקים, לא יצמחו לעולם פרחים באביב. המקום שבו אנו צודקים הוא רמוס וקשה כמו חצר. אבל ספקות ואהבות עושים את העולם לתחוח כמו חפרפרת, כמו חריש. ולחישה תשמע במקום שבו היה הבית אשר נחרב. Bertie, before you read, I want to thank especially to Yvonne, who did the whole thing, and it was so natural that she is doing everything that I didn't thank her at the beginning. But Yvonne should have all the credit for that festival.
Wow.
It's not a budget, you do what you have to do then.
Oh, I don't think we need.
You don't need that.
No, we don't need it.
The place where we are right. From the place where we are right, flowers will ever grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard. But doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole, a plough. And a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. The second poem I'm going to read in translation was chosen by David Amichai, who's had to go home back to Israel, but so he specifically selected this piece of his father's work to be read out tonight, and it's called Poem Without an End. Poem Without an End. Inside the brand new museum, there's an old synagogue. Inside the synagogue is me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum. Inside the museum, a synagogue. Inside it, me. Inside me, my heart. Inside my heart, a museum.
I'll read it in the Hebrew. שיר אינסופי. בתוך מוזיאון חדיש, בית כנסת ישן. בתוך בית הכנסת, אני. בתוכי, ליבי. בתוך ליבי, מוזיאון. בתוך המוזיאון, בית כנסת. בתוכו, אני. בתוכי, ליבי. בתוך ליבי, מוזיאון.
So I'm really delighted to introduce the poet Christopher Reid at his first reading at the Oxford Center for Hebrew and Jewish Studies. Though his connection with Oxford extends much further to the time when he read English at Exeter College. If I were to begin listing his publications, we would be here for some time. But because this is an evening celebrating poetry and translation, I want to highlight his 1985 collection, Katerina Brock, which purported to be a work of translations by an Eastern European poet. And I believe he's going to maybe read some poems from that collection today. He's also the author of A Scattering, which won the 2009 Costa Book Award, one of many accolades his poetry has received over the years. And most recently, he's published Anniversary, a pamphlet published in 2015. Please welcome Christopher Reid.
This is a desk that everything slides off, isn't it? Let's see what I can do. Thank you so much for that introduction. I will indeed read from Katerina Brock in a minute. But first of all, more importantly, here's a letter, an extract from a letter that Ted Hughes wrote to both Yehuda and Hana Amichai on the 14th of May 1983. But in this paragraph, Ted Hughes is addressing Yehuda in particular. Yehuda, I think you are my favorite poet. On one side, there are all the modern poets writing the great intercontinental express of modern poetry, coaches crammed indiscriminately with great men, brilliant women, comedians, charlatans, ninnies, etc., but all racing along the flashing rails, a resounding 150 mph concatenation of poetry, hurtling through the century. And on the other side is you, absolutely alone and apart from them, standing, I imagine, on a dusty hill over Jerusalem, the sole shepherd of the voices of human beings. You've discovered a subject that seems absolutely new to poetry, and it turns out to be the human being speaking like a human being about being a human being, or rather singing like one, the undiscovered animal. I'm trying to persuade Faber to publish it, and using every possible means, but that doesn't guarantee anything. Well, he wrote that, as I said, in 1983, and eventually a book came out from Faber in 2000. So he had to do a lot of persuading, and eventually I was the person that he persuaded. That letter was to my predecessor at Faber's, and eventually I was very happy to take on this book. It has a different cover now, and you'll find a heap of them outside, but this is the book that I was delighted to take on. Edited by Ted Hughes himself and his great friend Daniel Weissport. And I want to read just two poems from this. Two things which I think throw a lot of light on what Ted Hughes was saying there about the humanity of Amichai's endeavour, and about the importance of speaking to humans like a human. And they're sort of, well, I won't say anything more about them, because I have something to say afterwards. One of them is called Quick and Bitter in English, and the translators are Ted Hughes himself and Assia Gutman, who is better known to the world at large as Assia Wevel, who had a significant part, let me put it like this, in Ted's later story. Quick and bitter. The end was quick and bitter. Slow and sweet was the time between us. Slow and sweet were the nights when my hands did not touch one another in despair, but with the love of your body which came between them. And when I entered into you, it seemed then that the great happiness could be measured with the precision of a sharp pain. Quick and bitter. Slow and sweet were the nights. Now is as bitter and grinding as sand. We shall be sensible, and similar curses. And as we stray further from love, we multiply the words and sentences long and orderly. Had we remained together, we could have become a silence. And this, I think, almost even more poignant. The title is A Pity, We Were Such a Good Invention. They amputated your thighs off my hips. As far as I'm concerned, they are all surgeons, all of them. They dismantled us, each from the other. As far as I'm concerned, they are all engineers, all of them. A pity, we were such a good and loving invention. An airplane made from a man and wife. Wings and everything. We hovered a little above the earth. We even flew a little. Quite aside from the obvious urgency and poignancy of those two poems, I can't help reflecting on how the poems that Ted Hughes later wrote about Assia, collected in a not very well-known collection, though they are now in the collected poems of Ted Hughes, Capriccio, how those poems couldn't have been written without Amichai having told Ted Hughes how to be a human being, writing like a human being about human beings. The rhetoric is very, very similar. There's a sort of a curtness and a stoical kind of simplicity, which covers a great deal of emotion. Not covers it so that it can't be felt, but rather so it can be felt. Anyway, that's the end of my lecture, and I shall now read a few poems. Oh no, but there's a little bit of an addendum to that lecture. And it's actually I'm so pleased to be reading at a celebration of Amichai in Oxford, because it was when in Oxford that and I was a student from 1968 to 1971, and I was having a miserable time trying to understand English literature in the way that I was told by my tutors that I should understand it. But I turned in a kind of despair to a set of translations that were coming out from Penguin at that time under the rubric of Penguin Modern European Poets. And they included volumes about selections of the Polish poets, Bitton, Herbert, for instance, the Yugoslavian Vasco Popa, Serbian writer, and Miroslav Holub from the Czech Republic, Czechoslovakia as it was in those days, and of course Yehuda Amichai. And I fell upon these books as a sort of lifesaver. They really did make me feel again that I could understand poetry in a way that I understood poetry and was not being told to understand poetry by my totally benign, but this guy did tutors. And so it's a particular pleasure to be reading in Oxford with Amichai in mind. I brought out a book which is, as Adriana has just mentioned, called Katerina Brack, which pretends to be a set of translations from somewhere in Eastern Europe by a poet whose name you know, but you don't know her home country, and you don't know the language she's writing in. And I did this out of, as it were, a tribute to those books that saved my life in Oxford. So here's just maybe two of them, or perhaps three. The people among whom I live. I admire the people among whom I live. Oh, you have to understand that she's a sort of exile. She's been sent into. She's a city girl, Katerina, but she's been sent into the countryside under a kind of government exile. I admire the people among whom I live, even though they shoot and bring to the table the courageous little bird whose cry I have learned to interpret as "leave me alone," repeated again and again, and each syllable released separately like bubble capsules from the mouth of a fish. Even more callous is the way they treat their pigs, feeding them, pampering them as if they were members of the family, to whom they have given the rather grandiose names of opera singers and ancien regime war heroes, until one morning you see them prodding their rumps into the bleak interiors of army-style vans. But there's nothing false about such behaviour. This is the way they have always conducted their lives, ever since their ancestors in the muggy glens first trapped a wild cat by the elaborate ruse of a delicious buck in a deep hole, or bribed a falcon to fetch them a hare. In other respects, they are straightforward people and have treated me with nothing but kindness. Surely their sins are venial. They do not skulk in passages, waiting for the cage that carries its victim to a third-floor rendezvous, nor do they drool over a human heart. Realism. I have an idea for a film. It will begin with a birth, not the conventional euphemisms, but pictures of the real thing, mucky and time-consuming, like some operation in charcuterie, where the child is produced and a great deal of awkward business in its ugliest guise, a little howling blood sausage. At the end of the film, there will be a death, and this too will be shown in every possible detail, nothing omitted from the final grotesque drama of spasms and incontinence, just the events as they occur. And what, you may ask, will happen in between? I haven't decided yet, but at least I can promise years and years of realism, what our people have always required, but never yet been given. An angel. An angel flew by, and the electricity dimmed. It was like a soft jolt to the whole of being. I raised my eyes from the poems that lay on the kitchen table, the work of a friend, now dead. It should not have mattered. As the light glowed again, I ought to have continued reading. But that single pause terrified me. We say of the old that they tremble on the brink. I found that I was trembling. Perhaps the black country nights encouraged superstition. I remembered the angels that had visited people I knew, not hurrying past them and merely stirring the air, but descending with the all-inclusive wingspan of Annunciation to obliterate them totally. And I rose to my feet. That one brief indecision of the electric light in a night of solitude showed me how weak I was. The poems on the table lay where I had left them, not knowing they had been abandoned. This is ancient history for me, I should say. I wrote this book in 1984 and published in 1985. And I can barely believe I wrote it. Anyway, here we are. I'll read just one more from it, and then maybe a couple more recent things. A box. Imagine a box, but not a very big one, containing the following indispensable items. A bed, a soup bowl, a landscape of mists and birches, the words spoken by a pensive mother, the absence of a father, several books, including a dictionary with a torn spine and the works of the troubadours, a small photograph in which the wince of a girl in sunlight is the main point, a document with a stamp and a signature, a message received from the friend of a friend, a journey by train, an odd-looking parcel, some jokes, anxiety, and a final revelation. Imagine this box, which should not be too large, then take it and hide it with as little fuss as you can, somewhere you know its contents will be safe. These are new poems. I just read two of them. Running at the sea. They run at the sea runs at them, small girl, smaller boy, silhouetted against the sitting sun. They are of the age of jutting bellies and rounded behinds, the rest of them slender, tensile. When she leans forward to start her run, she's a hunter, halted, alert, in an African rock painting. Standing, he's Etruscan, pointing at distance, in profile, a much photographed museum Giacometti. They run at the sea keeps running at them. They skip the front rank of minor expiring waves, crash shin deep, thigh deep into the next, then either retreat or meet the body blow of the rollers with a stunned stagger, involuntary spin, or full backward collapse. When the sea withdraws, they leap up and run back to the shore, to do it all over again, the running, the skipping, the crashing and collapsing. Their voices are too far off to be heard. We hear only the sea running to greet and defeat them, with its eternal turmoil of boom and shush. I've been writing a lot about children lately. Here's for my final poem, another one. Game Theory at Newton Abbot. Two little girls are engaged in a game of giggles, a game without rules, or with rules they invent as they go along. One throws out, as a challenge, a scat of high notes. The other replies in kind, only higher, wilder, at greater length, or more shrill. Are they sisters, friends, or just two little girls flung together in a public place, a railway station, by another of life's imponderable caprices? Whoever they are cleverly making the most of the moment, enraptured by it, caught up and made giddy, as if by something fast and centrifugal at a fairground. In this clash and collaboration, parents, guardians, grown-ups, we, with our travel plans, tickets, and too much luggage, cease to exist. Giggling is everything.
Going to read A Pity We Were a Good Invention, but since you've already read it, Christopher, then luckily I have other poems by Amichai that I enjoy and that I'm happy to read. But I did want to say, in the few minutes that I have, just a very short story about that particular poem, because when I just recently published a book on Hebrew poetry and translation, and in my last chapter, I write about an American-born Hebrew poet named Harold Schimmel. And in a book of, that he wrote that was dedicated to the American poet Robert Lowell, who was one of his mentors, he has a poem that features this poem by Amichai, A Pity We Were a Good Invention. And he's describing this little informal poetry reading. It's him, Amichai, Robert Lowell, and the British-born Israeli poet Dennis Silk. And the four of them are sort of reading, and they want to share this Amichai poem with Lowell, but Lowell doesn't read Hebrew, and so they read it in translation, presumably. And in the poem, Schimmel's relating that Lowell is very confused. He's like, they were surgeons, they broke them apart, what's going on in this poem? And Dennis says very patiently, it's a poem about the end of a love affair, and the poem ends with Yehuda blushing. So it's just a lovely anecdote. But for the poem that I'm going to read, it also is a translation by Asya Gutman, Asya Webel. It comes from this wonderful book, the only one that she published of her translations. It's called Poems by Yehuda Amichai, and it features in the back a poem that she wrote out in her calligraphy with her sketches. So she sort of designed this cover. And this poem, now I've lost it. I'll find it again. This is a very well-known poem by Amichai. It's called Ibn Gaviron. Sometimes puss, sometimes a poem. Something always bursts out, and always pain. My father was a tree in a forest of fathers, covered in green cotton wool. O widows of the flesh, orphans of the blood, I must escape. Eyes sharp as tin openers, opened heavy secrets. But through the wound on my chest, God peers into the world. I am the door to his apartment. And now we're having a sort of open mic moment. So I know Bertie Green has a poem to read, perhaps?
No.
Or will you volunteer? Or I could move Glenda. Maybe this is, if you would like to read the poem you selected. And we have some books by Amichai, so if others want to come and read a poem, now's the time. We'll give this around 5-10 minutes, depending on how many people.
I would just like to say how lovely it is to be here, and what an honour it is to be here, because Yehuda has quite a long history with Oxford. We did a 3-day conference to celebrate his 70th birthday a long time ago, and I'm very happy to see Hana here. It's very nice to be amongst all of you. And I'd like to read a poem called, I read it in Hebrew and in English, called Out of 3 or 4 in a Room, which is an early poem of his, and very, very typical of the kind of poetry that he was writing at the time. משלושה או 4 בחדר, תמיד אחד עומד ליד החלון. הוכרח לראות את העוול בין הקוצים ואת השרפות בגבעה, וכיצד אנשים שיצאו שלמים מוחזרים בערב כמטבעות עודף לביתם. משלושה או 4 בחדר, תמיד אחד עומד ליד החלון, שערו האפל מעל למחשבותיו, מאחוריו המילים, ולפניו הקולות הנולדים בלי תרמיל, לבחות בלי צידה, נבואות בלי מים, ואבנים גדולות שהושבו ונשארו סגורות, כמכתבים שאין להם כתובת ואין מקבל. Out of 3 or 4 in a room, one is always standing at the window, forced to see the injustice among the thorns, the fires on the hill, and people who left whole are brought home in the evening like small change. Out of 3 or 4 in a room, one is always standing at the window, hair dark above his thoughts, behind him the words, and in front of him voices wandering without luggage, hearts without provision, prophecies without water, and big stones put there and staying closed like letters with no address and no one to receive them. The translation is by Astia Goodman.
It's me again, hello. So I'm Yvonne's son, and my mum absolutely adores Yehuda Amichai, and she spent all her time telling all of us, me and my 3 sisters, about Yehuda Amichai. And I suppose you don't really appreciate how special someone is if you're told every single day. But what I want to read to you is the first of his poems I ever read whilst I was actually walking through Jerusalem on the way to have dinner with Hana. And it really, really opened my eyes to how special this man was and how powerful his poetry is. So this is called An Arab Shepherd is Searching for His Goat on Mount Zion. And it's probably one of his most famous poems, but it's really, really special, so I will take this moment to share it with you guys. An Arab shepherd is searching for his goat on Mount Zion, and on the opposite mountain, I am searching for my little boy. An Arab shepherd and a Jewish father, both in their temporary failure. Our voices meet above the Sultan's pool in the valley between us. Neither of us wants the child or the goat to get caught in the wheels of the terrible Hadgadya machine. Afterward, we found them among the bushes, and our voices came back inside us, laughing and crying. Searching for a goat or a son has always been the new beginning of a new religion, these mountains. And that's translated by Hana blog.
So my grandfather, Stanley Arthur, started the Jewish Studies course at Yale, and so he looked at a lot of Amichai's work, and also had spoken with Amichai. And my nana actually, as a special gift for my 18th birthday, gave me an Amichai book that was signed, and had a message to my grandfather from Yehuda, which was very touching. So I've always loved his poetry, but it became very special to me after that. And one of my favourite poems, which I'm going to read, the translation by Hana blog, is Jews in the Land of Israel. So, we forget where we came from. Our Jewish names from the exile give us away. Bring back the memory of flower and fruit, medieval cities, metals, knights who turned to stone, roses, spices whose scent drifted away, precious stones, lots of red. Handicrafts long gone from the world, the hands are gone too. Circumcision does it to us, as in the Bible story of Shechem and the sons of Jacob, so that we go on hurting all our lives. What are we doing, coming back here with this pain? Our longings were drained together with the swamps. The desert blooms for us, and our children are beautiful. Even the wrecks of ships that sank on the way reached this shore. Even winds did, not all the sails. What are we doing in this dark land with its yellow shadows that pierce the eyes? Every now and then someone says, even after 40 or 50 years, the sun is killing me. What are we doing with these souls of mist, with these names, with our eyes of forests, with our beautiful children, or with our quick blood? Spilled blood is not the roots of trees, but it's the closest things to roots we have. Thank you.
Does anyone else have a poem you want to read? Now's your chance. All right. If not, then we'll move on to the next poet. So Erez Bitton's poetry has been a staple of my literature courses from the very beginning. And like all good poetry, one never tires of teaching it over and over again. And each time brings new revelations and new connections and understandings to the surface. Bitton was born in Algeria to Moroccan parents who immigrated to Israel in the fateful year of 1948. He is the author of several collections of poetry, the most recent being the 2015 collection, Beitap Santarim, in English, The House of Pianos. His poetry has been translated in many languages, and these translations include the collection is for sale outside, the full-length collection, You Who Cross My Path, which was published by Boa Editions in 2015 in C.P. Keller's English translation. His many accolades include, appropriately for this occasion, the 2014 Yehuda Amichai Prize. Please join me in welcoming Erez Bitton.
Good evening. I want to thank, first of all, Yvonne Green, who invited me to participate in this important festival. Amichai, great poet, dear friend. I'll begin reading a poem of Yehuda Amichai, Ibn Gevirol, and after I'll read a few of my poems. Ibn Gevirol. פעמים מוגלה, פעמים שירה, תמיד משהו נפרש, תמיד כאב. אבי היה עץ בחורשת אבות מכוסה תחב ירוק. אוי, אלמנות הבשר, יתומי הדם, אני צריך לברוח. עיניים חדות כפותחנים פתחו סודות כבדים, אבל דרך הפצע בחזי מציץ אלוהים בתבל. אני הדלת בדירתו. Now, first poem is to say desert to יהודה עמיחי. בדרך לירושלים מערד במונית, אני ויהודה עמיחי, ברגע של בין השמשות, נגעה בי מחט לשאול אותו, מה זה מדבר? נסה לתאר מדבר לאיש שאינו רואה. ויהודה עמיחי שתק, נדמה לי נבהל מעט. אחז בידי, ולאחר זמן אמרתי, אני מבין. נגע בי המדבר. להגיד מדבר ליהודה עמיחי. ידך השותקת, סרטטה לפניי נאות
ארז,
מדבר.
רק רגע בבקשה, רק רגע.
יש להם טעות בתרגום. לא, זה לא זה.
But that's the order.
It's the order, it's the dog after the
No, but this is after.
Okay, אז אנחנו עושים עכשיו ארז כלב.
רק
מה
שנייה,
היא אומרת?
חכה רגע, כי הם לא הציגו את התרגום הנכון.
אז תביאו לי מים בינתיים.
זה בקבוק אבל.
זה במה,
Yeah.
To stop reading poems, it means to kill the poem.
Okay, the next.
אוקיי, אתה יכול עכשיו להגיד מדבר.
ידך השותקת סרטטה לפניי נאות מדבר, ירוק על ירוק, ודרך עיניך כמו בכלים שלובים, יד נוגעת ביד, העברת אליי את גדולת הדיברת, פלא הסנה הבוער. הכלב ואדוניו. כי בקצב אדוניו ילך הכלב הנאמן צעד אחר צעד על ארבעותיו שלא ימעד אדוניו, ואם יצלע אדוניו גם הכלב יגלגם בהליכותיו, ירד מדרגה, רגל מדרגה, רגל עד תחתיותיו ועד למשטח הישר שלא ימעד אדוניו. והכלב יכבוש תאוותו למרחקים בלי גבור, יעצור בחובו טעם יערות עד ריח ציד מכה מבפנים. אבל מה יעשה האיש העיוור שכלבו נחלה פתאום? יעצל אותו בזרועותיו, יישא אותו על כפיו, כאוחז בעולל, ייתקל במשדרכות שבורות, ייתקל בעץ, ינגב באבן שפה. יביא אותו אל הרופא הנאמן, למנוחה הנכונה, חסד תחת חסד, ליווי תחת ליווי, ישיב לו גמול על הליכתו בצד המדוד, על שהביא לפניו טעם יערות עד ותנופת המתפרצים בין הציד. לרבח בן עמרי, משורר אלג'ירי עיוור, שהיה כאח לי. רבח, אתה ואני משתי אמהות עטופות המטפחות הלבנות המנסות להתנתק מאדמות קשות. אתה ואני משתי אמהות צועדות זו לצד זו אל המערות להימלט מן הצעקות הגדולות. אתה ואני ידענו לגשש זה אל זה במשושים דקים מן הדקים, והגענו לידידות שאין בה ראייה. מסדר זיהוי. הם יעמדו עליי כמו במסדר זיהוי, ואני אצטרך להרים את ראשי מן הקר כדי להכיר. הם יחפשו לפייס אותי בעיניים של ילדים. אז אזכר בגיחוכיי הכבדים. אותה שעה קו האופק יבהיק כמו אב חיוך דקיק. אז אפנה את פניי לקיר ולא אכיר. הם יחשבו שאני עושה את עצמי כמו להכעיס. הם תמיד חשבו שאני אוהב לעשות כדי להכעיס. אותה שעה, מה הם ימצאו בי? יותר ויותר. את נעשית בי יותר ויותר, וגם אני נעשה בך. איפה אני מתחיל, איפה אני נשכח. אני מערה אלייך את מהמורות חיי. את מערה אליי את יופייך, את חמדת צדודיתך בדלת. את ואני שתי חידות, שמחה גדולה, עוד אראה אלייך את היופי שביופי. נקים צאצאים של יופי גדול, של פשר גדול. את ואני. אני לידך נהיר וברור ומפוענח ולא מסוכס, אבל חסום, חוספס. ואני על בלימה, ואת יודעת שעם כל נגיעה קלה אני נכון לנפילה הגדולה. להיות הורג. בבית חינוך עברי בירושלים היה אדון צבי המנהל מצביע עליי לאורחים ואומר, הנה, זה קוראים לו ארז. נשים לו לולאה אחת בצד ימין ולולאה אחת בצד שמאל ונעשה ממנו הורג. למלכים ולשטיחים ולנסיכים. הורג לא נעשיתי. אבל ברגעים של חסד שיריי נעשים ערבדים קטנים לכל אורח ולכל דכפין. והשיר האחרון, לאמי לא חיו לה ילדים. לאמי לא חיו לה ילדים לאמי. הראשון לא חי לה הראשון שקראו לו דוד על שם אביה. השני לא חי לה השני שקראו לו מאיר על שם רבי מאיר בעל הנס ולא היה לו נס לחיות. והשלישי חי לה השלישי שקראו לו יאיש שזה חיים וזה הייתי אני וחייתי לה. אבל איזה חיים חייתי לך אמי. תודה רבה. Thank you.
There's a handout outside that collects various poems that Erez read. I know it was a little difficult for some people to read it on the PowerPoint, but thank you so much. Before I turn things over to Hana and Yvonne, now it's time to say a few words about Yvonne Green, who brought the festival to our attention. She is a native-born Londoner and worked as a barrister for many years, until she retired to devote herself to poetry, which is good for us. Her first pamphlet, Bukhara, was published in 2007 and won the Poetry Business Book and Pamphlet competition. Her most recent collection, which is out at the table in front, Jam and Jerusalem, which is a great title, was published this year. And I'm very pleased to welcome both of them to the stage where they will both read poems.
We should sit if we're going to read a bit together. Shall we sit? Yeah. Yeah. I think for me, meeting Hana, which came about because of my relationship with the late Daniel Weisbort and his widow, Valentina Polyukina, I think the thing that moved me most meeting Hana, having been someone who'd always read Yehuda, as everyone of our generation did, was the way she read his work and the way she understood him. Often without saying anything, that understanding was communicated. And I think you remember, Hana, when you first showed me the fragments of Yehuda's work, and I burst into tears in your house. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
And I felt very stupid, and she said, no, you know, that you're unique, which was a nice thing to say to a poet. And then we went to Yale to the Beinecke together, and we translated some of them as an exercise. I mean, others more eminent than me have published translations of those fragments. But it was a remarkable experience. And there was one funny moment, which was, you know, his handwriting is so particular, and you're not allowed to copy or photograph or anything. So I went to the loo where they had some like tracing paper, you know, toilet paper basically, but like tracing paper thin, and I took it in. And I traced some of this writing, and then I started to practice it at night, and I showed you this writing. And she said, "How have you got that piece of Yehuda's writing?" It was funny. Anyway, so what I want to do is simply to read a little bit of Yehuda's work. I'll read the English, and then Hana will read
I just want to add that I wasn't an eternal Yehuda's Amichai widow, even though nothing is written about me. I was teaching at the Hebrew University for years, and Department of Education, and I had my own life too.
Yes, I know. But we had a discussion about how I was going to describe Hana on the program, and I said the academic Hana Amichai, and in Hebrew that sounds very funny. Apparently,
No,
the retired academic. So
I could write. Never mind.
so it wasn't done right. Okay, so I'm very, very sorry.
Let's
And
go on. Okay.
it'll be on film the way it should have been done, and I'm very sorry. But we're still friends, I think. Even after a road of a week. Okay, so I'm going to read in English a poem called On Rosh Hashanah, on New Year's Day. And this is a poem which, to the uninitiated, is a poem not only about new starts, but refers to Jewish rituals of atonement, and in fact of confession, vidui, prior to the last rites. So I'll read in English and then you'll read up. On New Year's Day, next to a house being built, a man vows not to do any wrong in it, only to love in it. Sins that were green in spring have dried out in summer, and now rustle and whisper. So I washed my body and trimmed my fingernails, the last favour which a man does for himself while he is still alive. What is man? During the day he breaks up into little words what night has turned into a heavy lump. What are we doing to each other? What does a father do to his son? What a son to his father? And nothing stands between him and death, but a thin defence like a battery of excited lawyers, a fence of words. And he who uses people as handles or as steps of a ladder will soon find himself embracing a piece of wood and holding a hand cut from its body and wiping his tears with a potsherd.
ערב ראש השנה. ערב ראש השנה, ליד הבית הנבנה, נשבע אדם לא לעשות בו עוול, ורק לאהוב בו. החטאים שהיו ירוקים באביב יבשו בקיץ, ועכשיו לא חשים. אז רחצתי את גופי, ועשיתי את ציפורניי, גמילות חסד של אמת, שאדם גומל לעצמו בעודו חי. מה אדם? ביום מתיר למילים את אשר בלילה הפך לכדור כבד. מה אנו עושים האחד לשני? מה עושה אב לבנו ומה בן לאביו? ואין בינו ובין המוות אלא כסוללת עורכי דין נרגשים, זה ליד זה, חומה של מילים. והמשתמש באנשים כבידיות או שלבי סולם, עוד מעט ימצא את עצמו מחבק מקל עץ, ואוחז יד קרוטה מגוף, ומוחק דמעותיו בשבר חרס. I just want to say about, as I washed his body, can you read it? The second, אז רחצתי את גופי ועשיתי את ציפורניי.
I washed my body and trimmed my fingernails.
The last favor which a man does for himself while he is still alive. usually it's called the last favor. The real last favor is to do it to a dead body. And in the Jewish tradition, it's volunteer. People do it for voluntarily. And it's called chesed shel emet, the last true, איך אומרים חסד?
The last kindness, yes.
Because אין גמול, there's no
reward for that service.
for it. So what he says, so he did it to himself now. That's it, okay.
Beautiful. Thank you, Hannah. Thank you. And you know, you must realise how privileged we are to have Hannah here to give us her insights, because I don't think anybody reads him how she does. So, Hannah, can I read this one and then you'll read it in Hebrew?
Okay.
This comes from Travels, a bilingual edition. It's amazing what you can actually find on the internet, especially if you go to the old booksellers. And I just found this amazing pamphlet of this particular poem. The days bent over me quietly, like a doctor and a mother, and began to whisper together while the grass bent, flattened by the bitter wind on the hills. I shall never climb again. Moon and stars and the ancient deeds of adults were put high on a shelf out of my reach. In vain I stretched up to the forbidden bookshelves. But even then I was marked for death, like an orange for peeling, like a chocolate for breaking, like a hand grenade for explosion. The hand of fate held me tight. My heaven was the soft palm, its outside coarse skin, hard stars, its protruding veins, airlines, its black hairs, the trajectory of shells, silent or shining, in darkness or with flares. And before I was real and here to stay, my heart shouldered sorrows not my own, and strange ideas entered me, muffled, slow, jolting like a train into a listening, hollow station.
ובשקט, כרופא ואם, נרקנו הימים מעליי, והחלו להתלחש ביניהם. בעת העשב כבר שחר, מושכב ברוחו המרה, במעלה הגבעות שלעולם לא אשוב לדרוך בהן. ירח בכוכבים ומעשים עתיקים של מבוגרים, הושמו בהצטבה גבוהה, מעל להשגת זרועותיי. ועמדתי לשווא מתחת לכונניות האסורות, אך כבר אז הייתי מסומן לכליה כתפוח לקילוף, כשוקולדה, כרימון יד לפיצוץ ומוות. כף הכוונות החזיקה אותי היטב. שמי היו פנים כף היד המחזיקה, הרכה, ובחוץ האור המחוספס, כוכבים קשים, ורידים בולטים, קווי תעופה, שיער שחור, מסלולי פגזים בדומם ובניילל, בשחור ובנתב זוהר. ובטרם הייתי ממשי ושוהה כאן, עמסו כתפי הלב יגון לו לי, ורעיונות זרים נכנסו, עצורים ולעיתם בגרגור עמוק, כרכבת לתוך התחנה החלולה והמאזינה.
See, what Hannah can get, I think like no one else, is that conversational tone. I mean, when I read a translation or even try and read them in Hebrew, I am just slowed down by the impact of the words and the layering of the language. But Hannah reads it. Probably the way Yehuda was, the way he spoke, I don't know. Maybe there's something about the chemistry between the two of you. But I never heard anybody else read it like that. So, this me first, yes, sorry. Yes, so I'll read this. You ate and were full and blessed alone and in company and alone. In the marriage room and outside after the wedding stood the bearded witnesses listening for the voices of love, the sighs and moans and the cries, mine and yours in the marriage room. And at the door, wedding gifts mounted up like gifts for the dead in the tombs of Egyptian kings. The stone lions on the bridges in the city of my childhood stood guard with the stone lions of the old house in Jerusalem. This poem is referring to the Yichud room, isn't it?
Sorry?
This poem refers to the Yichud room, I think.
Yeah.
After you get married in Jewish law, you are put alone in a room, and the theory is that you're consummating the marriage, and everyone has to wait outside before they start dancing around you, and the fun begins. And so that's the metaphor there.
אכלת ושבעת וברכת, לבד ובמזומן ולבד, בחדרי איחוד שלאחר החופה. ובחוץ עמדו העדים המזוקנים והאזינו לקולות של אהבה, להנחות ולהמיות ולצעקות שלי ושלך בחדר האיחוד. ועל הדלת נערמו מתנות כלולות, כמו מתנות מתים על פי קברי מלכי מצרים, אריות אבן של גשרי עיר ילדותי, שמרו אלינו עם אריות אבן של הבית הישן בירושלים. I want to read, before Yvonne reads her poetry, one more short poem of Amichai, which is, I'll read the Hebrew first. אנשים משתמשים זה בזה, כמרפא לכאבם. אחד את השני שמים על הפצעים הקיומיים שלהם, על העין, על הערווה, על הפה ועל היד הפתוחה. תופסים זה את זה ולא רוצים להניח. People use each other as a healing for their pain. They put each other on their existential wounds, on eye, on genital, on mouth, and on the open hands. They hold each other hard and won't let go.
Can we do one last one?
Do you want another
Yes,
one?
yeah. I've got one last one, if you don't mind, Jess. On Fridays, they stitch my handkerchief to the corner of my pocket to protect me from carrying a sin on the Holy Sabbath. On festivals, priests blessed me from the white caves of their shawls, blessed me with cramped epileptic fingers. I looked at them, and God didn't thunder. Since then, his thunder has rolled back and become a great silence. I looked, and my eyes were not blinded. Since then, my eyes have opened wider and wider, from year to year, beyond sleep, to the rim of pain, beyond eyelids, beyond clouds, beyond years. Death is not sleep but open eyes, the whole body gaping with eyes pressed in the narrow space of the world. So this refers to when the priests bless in the synagogue, you're not supposed to look. You're supposed to look in the prayer book or look down, because you shouldn't get nobody should be favoured by any priest. The whole thing has to be a communal interaction. So.
ובערב שבת תפרו לי את מטבחתי לזווית כיס מכנסיי, שלא אטלטל אותה בערב לשבת קודש, ולא אחטא. ובחגים ברכו אותי כהנים מתוך מערות לבנות של טליתותיהם, באצבעות מעוותות כחולי נפילה. הסתכלתי בהם, ואלוהים לא רעם. ומאז הולך ונסוב רעמו ונעשה לי דממה גדולה. הסתכלתי בהם ועיניי לא התעברו. ומאז הולכות ונפתחות עיניי יותר ויותר משנה לשנה, עד בלי שינה, עד כאב, עד בלי אפיים, עד בלי עננים, בלי שנה. מוות איננו שינה, אלא פעירת עיניים. כל הגוף נפער עם העיניים, מאין מקום בעולם הצר. Okay.
Thank you very much, Hana. I want to thank, on behalf of all the participants in this festival, and everyone who's come here today, Adriana Jacobs, who was so enthusiastic from the start. It was very difficult for her to convene this event, but the minute that she proposed it to Judith Schlanger, there was absolutely no time lag. The event was going ahead. So we thank also, and most heartily, Judith Schlanger, the faculty head. Thank you very, very much. Is she gone? Yes. Oh, well, she knows now that she was remembered. I think there's only one thing you can do after reading Amichai is think about love. So I'll start with a poem called It's Good to Love. It's good to love and marry a man of regular habits, a kind man, to have children, teach them to live by ancient rhythms, to question as they live in a different present, use old languages alongside the new. It's good to have your own realm near the one you came from, to build a vision which splits light, makes surfaces on which all that's left of tears are tides of salt. As we were reading, and all through the festival, I keep seeing lines that were in my poems that were just stolen straight out of Amichai. So I suppose it's absolutely true that poets just steal all the time, and lesser ones steal most of the time, obviously. I'm going to read from my new collection, Jam in Jerusalem, and it's a poem called 100 Years War. This is the most important moment in the last 15 years, and the next 85. And you exoticize repression. Enjoy opera about benign supremacists, interspersed with elegant picnics, course by course, reassured over champagne, insulated. This is the most important moment in the last 15 years and the next 85. And over and over and over again you reason that and that and that would be enough to make me terrorized. As though you can explain, relieve, own the mayhem with reason, transform it by your act of imposed, assumed humanity. In Iran, the bloggers say you in the West fail to grasp the double glance of their leaders. Westward, eastward, for you, for them, and lift sanctions with a focus on ISIL while Syria, Yemen, Gaza, Lebanon don't fit the puzzle. It's untidy, but paying for their boys to die doesn't seem to confuse you. There are no similes, metaphors, strophes that whistle in the trees under the Glyndebourne which shades you. There's no silence either in my bowed head, or when I try to hold my back straight. My children live in impossible times and run amok as children do. Their fears are masked in where they'll work, who they'll love. Not a lot is said about before war came explosions, instead of the war games they play on consoles. It's impossible now they're old enough to sense that we'll grow away from the front if we're as lucky as we've been so far, although we remember our parents' wounds. Oh, tell me when to speak, write, when to stay silent, how to teach the when to pray, hold faith, take up arms. I want to read another one which is called Honourable Discharge, and I sort of heard this on the radio. It's what sometimes called a found poem, and it was a series of interviews surrounding somebody who'd been discharged from the military with PTSD, which again was something that came up this week that Yehuda was writing, having served in the British Army, having been drafted in the Israeli army, and having then wanted to process these experiences, and nobody knew anything about PTSD, or they didn't talk about it. And this radio thing that I heard, the thing that struck me was that if you leave the army because you've got PTSD, it's a honourable discharge. It's called an honourable discharge when you're wounded or something like that. And it seemed there was a disconnect for me. Anyway, this is more or less what I heard. 1. What you know is his nerves are shot. Well, they would be. And his mother says, well, she doesn't know what to do. Leaves him to himself mostly. That girlfriend of his hasn't been seen since March. The good weather did it. Off to Margate was her excuse. He's got nothing to say on that or anything else. Yes, he's had a lot to contend with. His tours were all in Afghan, bomb disposal. It's a wonder he came back at all. Well, he hasn't really, in a way. He never goes out. But you've got it from Mavis that he looks shocking, too. Have you heard what they're saying? It's easy for them to tell your story, dine out on it when you're not there, to say different. Bowed and broidered, even dumped up and kick-started. You can't go anywhere with your eyes up from the pavement, thoughts unconstricted, fists unready. All it would take would be to buy the story along with rounds of drinks and backslaps unflinched over. All it would take would be for you to do the shopping, cook something, take a bath, shave, open your mail, switch on the telly, answer the phone, share, smile, plan something, leave your room, stop waiting, interrogating silence. I think I will embarrass my son now. He sort of embarrassed me. No, it's a parent's job, isn't it? No, it's not really embarrassing. I think it's because I want to read it because you read about those lovely little girls at the water, and you read about the water. The prayer. I've had 2 batches of children, and this relates to the later batch, where you really know how to enjoy things, I would say. The prayer. We enjoyed these children together, didn't we? Coaxed them along miles of English sands. Got Bert to dip his feet in rock pools. Watched Rachel love the sea her brother hated. We both climbed sandbanks, pushed nappy bottoms over the top, and shrieked as we all slid down. We ate endless fish and chips with ketchuped fingers and watched them lard their hair, each other and us. We both laughed. we both bathed them, laughing as they bailed water out of the bath, loving their naked bodies as they slithered away from our towels. You, like me, loved the trip to school, smiles stolen in the rear-view mirror, and lent into with the turnaround at traffic lights. If I wave, Bertie says it's safer to drive with two hands. We enjoyed these children together, so we'll both remember when their bodies move like adults, and when we wait to catch their eyes as eagerly as they now wait to catch ours. I think that's enough with me. Thank you very much indeed.
I think now we were just going to moderate. I know some people have to go, so this would be a good time if you need to leave. We're going to moderate just a short discussion, maybe about 5-10 minutes, and then have refreshments and buy books and talk to the poets. So let's see. I think maybe just for simplicity's sake, everyone can stay where they're seated. But I wanted to invite the audience to ask questions of the poets and readers. So any question you want for anyone. All right, well then I'll start. My question is for Yvonne, because you've sort of conceived this idea and have brought it to life. What have you noticed taking these poets and poems around different universities, different readers, different audiences? What has been the most surprising thing for you in terms of Amichai's continued reception today?
Well, first of all, looking at the people who've supported the festival, looking at the people who supported the festival, the Poetry Society immediately wanted to be involved. My publisher, Smith Doorstop, immediately encouraged the venture. Who else is on the list? I'm sorry, I'm getting a bit of amnesia. The Exile Writers Inc. wanted to align themselves, so he's still, although he's in a sense in the heart of the world establishment of poetry, the Exile Writers Inc. organisation felt that he had a lot of relevance to their members. The Royal National Institute for the Blind were absolutely fascinated by the juxtaposition of Erez and Amichai, and the fact that Erez had won the Amichai Prize, and the fact that this had had a seminal effect on his coming to the fore in terms of world poetry as well. I understood it, on that book it says the Lanham Foundation. I don't know whether they gave it a grant or whether they play a part in publishing Erez's book, but I mean he's a poet of the first echelon, and Amichai had the generosity to find within his own country someone of that stature, and Hana too. I know Hana's played a very, she's friends with Erez and Rachel. And so that I thought was very interesting. Jewish Book Week, who were interviewing me this year, contacted me and they said, we heard you're doing this, can we have an event? But our team are here this week, they're not there next year, but we are going to try and take somebody to Galway. We haven't got any funding, we've run out of all the funding, but we're trying to get, maybe David will come to Galway for a reading with me in March. You can come too if you want. And Robert Alter, I mean, he's the world authority on Amichai, gave us the most wonderful program note in here, which I commend to every student and everybody who's got an interest in Yehuda. Of course, there was this question that everybody comes and they feel a sense of ownership and affinity, and a lot is said about how straightforward he is to translate and how universal his concepts are. But I mean, Adriana herself has written so well and so beautifully about the layering of Amichai's work, and I've seen that at each event. Somebody will come up to me and say, tell me something very sort of intellectually rigorous, really, which I didn't know. And then someone else, one of maybe the younger readers who came, we've had young readers at every venue, and every venue's been virtually full. In London it was sold out actually, and Cambridge was full. And last night we did a private house reading, and that you couldn't move in there. But there's this sense of immediacy that people are describing. I think I've lost the train of thought. I'm not an academic. I don't think I can do this any better than that. But maybe somebody else could answer a bit.
Anyone else?
Well, may I ask?
Yes.
Erez, may I ask you, and it's been said on several occasions that Yehuda was very influential for you. Can you put into your own words the influence which Yehuda Amichai has had on your work and his importance for you?
I'm sorry to say that there is difference totally between my poetry and the excellent, the fantastic poetry of Yehuda Amichai. But I cannot now talk about that differences. Of course, Yehuda Amichai began to write before me, many years before. But my poetry began as poetry of Moroccan men, North African men who trying to bring to the Israeli poetry another kind of writing and talking. If you see, I always read my poems by heart. I write them by heart, not only because I am blind man, but also because I came from origin of Oriental origin. It means that generally the poetry is telling by heart. But of course, I love very much Yehuda Amichai, and I admire him, of course. Thank you.
Of course, Erez has been on the National Committee for the Educational Committee, which is designed to rewrite the curriculum in Israel so that the children in schools learn not only the Western Jewish experience in the immigration to Israel, but also to learn more of the Eastern immigration, because 1 million Jews came to Israel after the state was formed, and the method of absorption was Ulpan, whereby everybody was taught Hebrew very, very quickly, and a culture was, a universal culture was aimed at and created. And after a period, somebody like Erez was seminal in his work in saying, well, hold on a minute, I just want to tell you about, this smaller group in the, I mean, it's not small, but it was a smaller group in the literary sense. And he told just the stories and the history, and he used language which had not yet been used. And that in that way, I think he is similar to Yehuda, because Yehuda took the Bible and used it in a different way, the language of the Bible, and created a new language. He was on the language committee in Israel, where they were literally creating a language. And Erez himself brought into the lexicon, the literary lexicon, the smells and language and ideas and loyalties of what some people call Arab Jews. There's certainly Mizrahis, the word that's used, Eastern Jews. And I have a strong affinity with Erez because I myself come from a background like that. My mother was born in Egypt, my grandparents were from Bukhara, and my poetry is full of foreign language because in our family, I don't know about Erez, I don't know if it happened to you, but in our family, they spoke about 9 or 10 languages, and if they saw a child understanding what was being said, they would switch language mid-sentence.
You know, Yvonne, that sometimes I put in my poems
Yes.
Words from Arabic.
Yes.
Arabic
yes.
words in the Hebrew poetry.
Yes.
And it was a new thing in the Israeli new poetry.
Yes.
If there are no further questions, I think maybe we should continue the conversation over some wine and crisps, and please buy books. And if you want them signed, maybe our poets will be willing to indulge that request. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you to all the participants in this wonderful event. Thank you.